Michael.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you. Thank you for coming down.
My pleasure.
Now, as you know, the Building in Manhattan format, we're trying to help people understand the complexities of, and also the ease and some of the difficulties of building in Manhattan. You have a really unusual architectural practice because you do both the design, the expediting, and also you do a lot of building reviews, which is quite a big part of your practice, I understand. And you have how many buildings that you do reviews for now?
About 100 now.
About 100 buildings, and you got some pretty major players in the building industry that you review plans that.
Some of the highest profile buildings in the city.
Like
220 Central Park South, 157 West 57th Street. Pretty high profile buildings.
As high profile as it gets.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the different aspects of your practice. Let's start with the review process, because it's something that most people who are going to renovate an apartment are going to have to go through some level of review process with an architect, and it's often considered, certainly from the client perspective, a bit of a necessary evil. Sometimes it's sometimes seen. Thank you very much. It's sometimes seen that, if I didn't have to do this, my life would be a little bit easier. Maybe you can talk to why it's so important, and how you and your firm really tries to make this as simple and as straightforward as it can possibly be.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's it's part of the unique character of New York. New York is a very dense city. New York has about 1 million existing buildings. So it's unlike other parts of the country where you buy a piece of land and you build.
I didn't know that. 1 million existing buildings.
Pretty much 1 million, and they build about 200 new buildings every year. So basically our stock is existing buildings, and the existing buildings go back hundreds of years, but most of them certainly since post-Civil War.
Yeah.
And because of that, and we have a tremendous density here, and we were like the first to write a zoning resolution and the first to come up with building codes. And because of that, we have to make sure that everything is safe for our inhabitants.
Yeah.
So the whole building review process has to do with ensuring safety and ensuring that the building that it's within, because it's unique because people live on top and next to each other, which is different than most places, that they're not causing harm to other people.
Yeah.
That's sort of what the intent is. Everyone wants people to renovate. It's good for the economy. It's good for the life of the building. It increases the values of all the units. So everyone wants people to renovate, but they want them to renovate in a fashion that doesn't harm the building.
The contractor's Hippocratic oath: first do no harm, right?
The contractor's. I wish that was true. But so the process is evaluating, and it's also for predictability.
Yeah.
You don't want to have, because there are other people, there are superintendents and managers involved, and you don't want to have someone start a renovation and then have some of the management come in and say, that's not what I thought you were doing.
Yeah.
So it's no harm and predictability. So the process is submitting plans to the building management, they give it to an architect or an engineer to review, and they basically evaluate it not for how nice the faucet is or how pretty the sink is, but how are you maintaining dust control? How are you maintaining sound control on the floor? How are you maintaining dry conditions when you're putting in new bathrooms or kitchens? And that's really what it is. And it would be simpler for people. When I review for a building, I put all of my criteria in the alteration agreement, and I give them a checklist and a narrative, and saying this is what I'm looking for. Because if you give me all this, I'll have very little to say.
And we'll turn it around for you in.
The problem is, people don't do that. So we get scraps of paper sometimes. And that's when it becomes difficult, because we have to try to figure out what people are trying to do. If they're very clear on what they do, there's very little you can say, and if they do it professionally. Now, the problem with our industry is it's not always done by architects or engineers. So in our industry, people go to contractors first, people go to home improvement companies, people go to designers, people from foreign countries have their own favorite professional in foreign countries, and they're not necessarily familiar with what we're looking at. If you deal with someone who deals with New York City apartments, they know. It's a pretty simple game. These things are, you submit it, you get comments, you respond to the comments, and you go about your business. It really is that simple.
And also, I think what's often lost on the individual end user, the apartment owner, when they send off their set of plans, is that you're part of a $100, $200, $300, $400 million investment that you are a single part of, and you tapping into a plumbing system in a particular manner can cause chaos. You not re-establishing the fire rating of walls and penetrations can be a real life safety issue. And I've had my moments where I've got documents back from reviewing architects, and they want a waterproofing detail for the kitchen, which was built 12 months ago by the developer, and when we cut the wall open the floor, there is no waterproofing detail. So
you'll find that with washing machines too.
We end up in this sort of Hobson's choice catch-22 situation where the detail that should have been done by the developer wasn't actually done. We've ended up going backwards and forwards for umpteen days or sometimes weeks trying to.
The philosophy I use is if you touch it, you fix it. So even though the developer didn't change the floor, it didn't waterproof the floor. If you're not changing the floor, let it be. But if you're going to retile the floor, do it right.
100%. And this is where I think that the reviewing architects have a great deal of responsibility for making sure that the building isn't just changed, but it is either maintained or improved. Because if it wasn't done since 1975, electrical codes change, plumbing codes change, it should be brought up, because some of that work won't happen again for another 20 years. So to not do it now seems crazy.
I agree. It's the same philosophy that Landmarks has, is that you fix the world a little at a time. That's the way. You're not tearing down the building and starting new. If it's broke, you fix it.
But Landmarks is for sure a world of its own.
It is. It's an interesting world. I've over the years gained tremendous respect for them. I used to not understand them, and since then I have tremendous respect for the Landmarks people.
So we've got the architectural review process, and you also have a very robust expediting practice. I think there's a lot of mystery around these two aspects of construction are actually probably the most misunderstood by the client in my experience.
Well, expediting is a misnomer. I mean, expediting implies that you're doing something quick, but we're not doing anything quick. The city's process for approving anything is very convoluted and complex. So the person who calls himself an expediter is a filing representative. He's a code and zoning consultant.
I like that, filing representative.
Well, that's what the DOB now wants you to call it, the Department of Buildings wants you to call it.
Oh, right.
But he's also a code and zoning consultant. So we need to know the codes and we need to know the processes. And the only way to know it is to have been through it for many, many years and to be down there every day.
Because there's no expediting school, right?
There's only one course that I know of, and I teach it.
Oh, really?
I teach it at NYU.
Oh, you do?
For about the last 15 years, yes.
Really?
Yeah, it's a course called Building Department Approvals, Permits, and C of Os.
Really?
And I teach it 3 times a year. Yeah.
You know what? I wasn't aware that there was anywhere that
it's the only place. This is stuff you learn in the field, but I've codified it, and I try to explain it in simple terms.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of knowledge. So I tell people that the expediting is a knowledge-based business.
Yeah,
it's not a hocus pocus, I know somebody kind of business, what line to stand on. That's where the people don't understand what we do. But we know the processes because there are alternatives for how to file. So we try to choose the one that fits the timetable. We know each borough is different, each work type is different, and we know the examiners are different. So we know how to deal with them. But it's usually based upon fact. It's not based upon
fantasy.
There's no hocus pocus. And quite frankly, it's just like the contracting business. It's based upon trust. When an examiner sees my plans, they can trust me. They can trust me that I'm representing it properly and that I've reviewed the situation and I've complied with the laws. As opposed to a lot of out-of-state practitioners and practitioners that don't do this on a regular basis.
Don't understand the nuances.
They don't understand the basics. It's really not that complex.
Yeah. What I find, having the right architect and having the right expediter is the first major step towards having a successful project. Because if something isn't filed correctly, if it's not annotated correctly on the plan, and then it's filed in a particular manner by an expediter that requires certain special inspections will now be triggered because of the way it's been filed, you can end up in such a world of complexity because they think you're building the Sears Tower and all you're doing is putting up a kid's bunk bed because it was filed as structural engineering rather than light steel decorative metalwork.
Experience is experience. But you got to be very practical too, because you want to get through the system, and but you don't want to. A lot of people are deceptive, and that's not a good thing because you're ultimately going to get into trouble.
How do you mean?
They don't represent things clearly, and they do things because it's not shown on the drawings, and they'll do things.
From the contracting side, or from the architectural side? So talk about that. Help me understand that a little bit.
Well,
what do you see as being a pitfall that the uninitiated, might want to be educated about so they can see it for themselves?
Well, we can take a few steps back, and let's start at the beginning. The beginning is when we review plans. One of the first things we review is whether a job needs to be filed or not.
Yes.
Because not all jobs need to be filed.
No.
So people don't understand what triggers filing, and it's pretty simple. We have a building code that says ABC needs to be filed, and we also have.
So if you're moving more than 45 or adding 45 square feet of sheetrock, you need to.
Correct. If you're
file.
Taking down a portion of a wall, or you're building any wall, a closet, you got to file it.
Yep.
So, but people don't realize that. So that they you could change. Typical renovation is changing a bathtub to a shower.
Yes.
You can do that without filing it, and only a plumber gets his
just
LAA.
Pull an LAA permit and you're good to go.
Yeah. But people don't realize. So the first thing we do is point out to them that, by the way, by you taking down all the walls in the kitchen,
you're triggering a filing event.
You got to trigger a file.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. If they went to an architect in the first place, they wouldn't be fighting with us. They'd be submitting a set of drawings which comply with that. Because once you have to file, you have to prove. Filing drawings are different than contract drawings. Filing drawings are code compliant drawings.
Yes.
It shows that you comply with the zoning resolution, the building code, and handicap laws.
Yep.
And the energy code today.
Yep.
So that's what filing drawings are. Well, people don't understand that.
So that would be for a full filing, but we also come across, the two of us, we come across what they call a self-cert or same-day filing.
Well,
often.
Yeah, all the same information has to go in any filing. There are various ways to file.
Yep.
There's a standard filing, which means you submit it, and then they review it, and then you go back and resolve the objections. There's professional certification. It's not self-certification. Plumbers self-certify. We professionally certify. They get approved instantly, but the design professional takes a lot of responsibility. They basically say they comply with every law, made to mankind.
Yeah.
And
if it doesn't, they have to fix it.
They have to fix it, and they're responsible for it. And so we most co-op and condo buildings don't permit professional certification. And they don't permit it because they don't trust the professionals.
Yeah.
We only do the most simple things. People who professionally certify try to do things that are gray, and therefore they're not being challenged.
Yeah.
But they're taking that responsibility of the interpretation of the code on themselves. There's no need for that.
Do you find, we come across it often, and my general rule of thumb is if it's straightforward, we're dropping a ceiling in 2 rooms, we're putting lighting in, we're not changing the layout in any way. This was a perfect application for for a professional certification.
I agree.
Do you find you're asked often as the reviewing architect by the co-op board, should we allow this, or it's generally in the bylaws, or it's decided by the co-op board and the president that they should or shouldn't? And do you have an opinion that it might be worthwhile recommending send this to a reviewing architect like yourself and let them adjudicate on whether this should be a professional certification?
Most buildings have the policy before I get involved.
Okay.
I ask, and even if they permit it, I'll object to it when I see plans.
Unless it's super simple.
Yeah, but oftentimes I see plans that are just not prepared properly, that people don't have the understanding. I reviewed a set of plans a couple of weeks ago for the most expensive piece of real estate in America.
Wow.
And it was the best set of plans I've ever seen.
Wow.
I had very little to say about it.
Yeah. So hiring the right team, again, hiring professionals, hiring people that know what they are doing, we don't come cheap, but cost is a very subjective thing. Is taking an extra 3 months and end up being at the same place actually saving any money rather than going to the professionals in the first place?
Okay, but architects, we have a lot of architects in New York City. I don't know how many, we have a lot. They don't all specialize in this. Most architects
most architects know very little about it.
They're trained to be design architects.
Yep.
And design is important, but it's only 10 or 15% of the process.
I agree.
So you got to find people who are in this business. I don't know that many.
No.
I know only one other firm that is directly in competition with us,
yeah.
who do all the things to do. But if your concern is getting things done quickly, you should be searching for firms that understand this.
That understand
Not
the process,
necessarily
yeah.
firms that can pick the nicest wallpaper for you.
Yeah.
Because that's the easy part.
Assuming they like it. On that note, Michael, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's always
pleasure.
fascinating to sit and talk to you with your extraordinary wealth of information and knowledge. For however many years, 30 years in 40 years in the business. And you know what? I think I might sign up for your expediting course. Okay. I'd find that very interesting.
2 weeks it starts.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
My
Great
pleasure.
to see you.